In today's What If episode, I'm going to ask the question, what if these cards were restricted, or in some other cases, Errata'd? This may be one of the most close to home What If episodes for you, if you play decks that utilize these cards, or see them constantly played against you. This episode will first go over the list of cards that I thought should be restricted, with the second part of this video going over the Erratas with my opinion that would make them more fair. And if you enjoy these types of videos, do consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell for future content. The Digimon restriction ban list was not long ago, and while Bandai finally made the decision to ban Mega Digimon Fusion and restrict Ice Wall and Reinforcing Memory Boost, a part of me wishes there was more to the restriction list after having played in the format for several weeks. While some players will argue that the meta is fine, I have to ask, do you play blue or yellow? Which leads me to the following cards that I also felt deserved a restriction. Number 1. Jet Sylphimon. Jet Sylphimon is my number 1 pick for the cards that I would have wanted to see hit the restricted list. While it does require you to have a hybrid Digimon underneath it for security recovery, it also generically recovers security even if you're at 5. In many games I've played with Yellow Hybrid, I've climbed as high as 10 security. In combination with cards like TK Takashi and Zoe Orimoto, you can always find Jet Sylphimon in the security, reveal to your opponent that you now have a Jet Sylphimon, recover, and be ready to set up next turn for another recovery. After all, opening with TK Takashi is the biggest power move for yellow players, because you get immediate knowledge of what is in there. Pulling Zoe Orimoto further facilitates what you pull next, and then it's off to recovery land. But I 100% can see why this card would not have been touched, for the fact that if this were at 1, Yellow Hybrid's power significantly goes down. Number 2. Korikakumon. When it comes to looking at how to undercut blue, there were 2 cards that came to mind, Tomihime and Korikakumon. Tommy can be oppressive with source stripping and that stunning inheritable effect. But keep in mind, you have to attack with said Digimon for the stun to actually happen. Korikakumon, on the other hand, can be digivolved into for a memory cost of 2, then into a Bay Wolfmon for reduced memory cost of 1, for not only the stun and bounce, but recycling the Korikakumon on another hybrid or another Tomihime in the future. Not only does blue get memory blockers and memory reducing blockers, but blocker and attacker stun as well. And unlike Jet Sylphimon, which by restricting her would absolutely kill the deck, you could stun with 4 copies of Tomihime, and utilize other cards like Kendo Garurumon with its jamming to maintain survival. Number 3. Starter Deck 1, Greymon. Unpopular opinion, but the card's too generic. While people may complain about blue stun and yellow recovery, red has been given a lot of freedoms in many ways as well, by having massive security checks in one turn. With Justmon, the inclusion of Greymon and BT1 Taikamiya made OTKs very prevalent, and for some players, this took the fun out of the game. Sure, in the present meta, if Justmon swings and hits that Tomihime, it's an immediate removal of 3 sources and you lose Tai and Starter Deck Greymon's effects. As a result, you'll only be able to check 1 security after the unsuspend from Savior Huckmon. Or against yellow, maybe you run smack dab into that Wyvern's Breath. Overall, Greymon is one of those cards that, while I am a huge fan of it, could honestly go or get an Errata. While there are cards that I absolutely detest in the current meta, i.e. BG4 Kari Kamiya, it's not really her fault, but more so the ease of security recovery with yellow. But I'm on board with a lot of players in the Digimon community that Bandai has been doing the game right in terms of restrictions with the all, one, or none rule. But now comes the second part of this What If episode. What if these cards were Errata'd? Errata is a way for card games to correct an error with a card, i.e. it was never intended to get that out of hand. Coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! There are a lot of cards that when initially made were very powerful, but with Erratas made them more balanced and able to come off the ban list. With Digimon, there is currently only 1 banned card in the Digimon trading card game, and that is Mega Digimon Fusion. And honestly, should such a card ever come off the ban list? In terms of Erratas, what if Mega Digimon Fusion only worked when you digivolved into a Digimon with Omnimon in its name? However, there's one problem. Lilith Loop players would be completely fine with this. While you'd be able to not allow Suzanomon plays, Lilith Loop would be back. And we can't have that. Mega Digimon Fusion is one of the only few cards that I racked my brain for a bit for a way to make it balanced. And here are other what-if erratas to consider. Like, after this option card is played, you cannot gain any memory for the remainder of the turn. In discussions with Eric Edlund, one of your judges in North America, they mentioned a more severe approach. What if instead of not gaining any more memory this turn, you can't play any more Digimon after your next Digivolution? With memory blocking for the remainder of the turn, this stops Lilithmon players from recycling their Jack raids and going off more to get more attackers on field. Likewise, with the more severe errata of not being able to play Digimon, this makes really the best target for this option card, BT1 Omnimon. Granted, you can still use Zwart's effect to delete a Digimon. And while Mega Digimon Fusion was a huge problem, let's look at the other current restrictions. For Ice Wall, this one's relatively simple for me. You can only play one Ice Wall a turn. Simple fix. You can have 4 of it back. This requires players to have memory fixers. That way you can get at least 2 attacks in, versus 1. Reinforcing Memory Boost. Again, this one I had to rack my brain for a bit. And with additional discussions, Eric yielded interesting concepts. Instead of delay 3, maybe delay 2. Pushing to 5 memory takes it so that you can't pop the delay and play another with 0 memory still. Alternatively, another discussion point was matching with Dynasmon and Mastamon's effect. Instead of adding 1 to hand and putting 1 on top of security, you trash 1 and recover with the other. While purple-yellow decks may enjoy this aspect, yellow players are now left critically thinking about whether they want to lose a card or have it go to security, and play TK to grab it back. As for HPD, Hidden Potential discovered, very balanced. Bring it back to 4. Fight me. You're lucky it's not Digizorption, otherwise, that'd be where some broken shenanigans could happen with Sarismon. With future restrictions for Savior, Huckmon, and Eismon, these could be easily fixed in many ways as well. Savior Huckmon, same effect, but make it that you need to have 2 or more Digimon with Sistermon in their name in play. If you're playing the Raise game, you better have those Sistermon already set up on the battlefield. There's a lot of removal at this point to get rid of even just 1. As for Eismon, Eric brought up a valid point. For balance, you can only play 1 Eismon per scatter mode in your trash per turn. If you have 2 scatter modes, you can play 1 Eismon, and if you draw into another one later that turn, you can play the other. If you have 1 scatter mode and 2 Eismon, you can only play the 1. But for balancing the above cards I mentioned were restrictions as well. What would work to make the game less rage-inducing? Personally, when playing against Yellow Hybrid right now, I dread hitting Karikamiya. Because with the memory fixer out, they can recover security for days, and then bottom deck lost pieces with Suzanomon. Jet Sylphimon I personally think is very powerful. Currently, it requires you to have a Digimon with Hybrid in its evolution source. But personally, I feel that Jet Sylphimon should align more with other level 5 Digimon that have when Digivolving recovery effects, like Angelomon from the starter deck, and only recover if you have security 3 or less. By doing so, you have less people building up to 9 or 10 security with Jet Sylphimon and recycling. Korikakumon's stun effect is very powerful. There's no denying that. The issue with Korikakumon is that you ultimately end up choosing between Tommy or Korikakumon being the problem. Tommy strips 3 sources, but the inheritable is powerful only if you attack. Korikakumon, on the other hand, just needs to Digivolve, which in itself is an annoyance, considering it can be Tommy Himi or any hybrid. Personally, I felt that Korikakumon's effect should only resolve when Digivolved on Tommy or Kumamon to get the effect. That's synergy with Tamer and Hybrid. And finally, starter deck Greymon. If Savior Huckmon weren't getting restricted, I'd pick this guy to get the restriction instead. Starter deck Greymon is one of the best level 4s in red that gives you an inheritable extra security check. But it's generic and doesn't have specific requirements. Can you imagine if BT6 Agumon gave you +1 security check if this Digimon had Greymon, Omnimon, or Agumon in its name instead? Likewise, to make this Greymon less generic, make it specifically Greymon and Omnimon family, because that's what it was originally for. What are your thoughts on all the restrictions and erratas discussed in today's video? What do you think are fair? Unfair? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is Digi-Panda, logging out.